Everyone. Welcome to our fifth lecture ulit. This is the third part of the fifth lecture in physics, which will cover on collisions. So pag sinabi natin collision, it is impact. Balik kung may dalawa akong object sa isang system, nagsaslide sila sa isang the same axis, then nagbagaan sila. That's what you call collisions. And during that time, nagkakaroon ng transfer ng momentum dahil sa impulse na nag-apply between those forces. Remember the third law of motion. So, ang physics dito sa collisions will cover on how momentum is conserved and how the energy is maintained. If it's maintained completely or not so much. So, let's deal with the mismo lecture. Okay, when we say elastic and inelastic impacts, these are what we call the classifications of collisions. When a collision is said to be completely elastic, its kinetic energy remains constant in a collision. So pag sinabi natin constant, yung initial kinetic energy is equal to the final kinetic energy. So suppose meron ka daw objects dito, 1 and 2, nag-collide sila. Then boom, sumabog, nag-collide. Most probably, in completely elastic collision, the same lang yung mangyayari. Ang mangyayari lang is magkakaroon ng parang transfer ng velocities. Wala namang, kung anong velocity na itong object 1, magta-transfer sa object 2, tapos kung anong velocity ng object 2, magta-transfer sa object 1. And ang E-value niya, which we will talk about later, what it means is what? So, recall na natin sa chemistry, it is in the gas, ano tawag ito? Yung assumption of ideal gases, di ba? Remember that. When gas particles collide with each other or dun sa container niya, its energy is maintained. So, walang loss of energy. That's what we call the elastic collisions. On the other hand, a collision is said to be completely inelastic if the colliding bodies stick together and move off as a unit afterwards. So, suppose meron ka ulit object dito, object 1 and object 2. Once na nag-collide sila, in a completely inelastic manner, then the two objects will stick, then will move to the direction na may mas malaking momentum. So, bale, parang mamanggal sila, tapos madadrag yung isa dun sa motion ng isa. Pwede makakancel lang na konti, pero maintain pa rin yung velocity nito may larger momentum. In the real world, however, ang elasticity is between 0 or 1. Walang perfectly elastic, walang perfectly inelastic collision. Kasi nga, kinetic energy is not conserved. It's a theoretical. It's a, what they call this, parang ideal assumption para ma-simplify lang calculations. So, yun na naman yung sasabihin ko. So, let's deal with the next part. So, in here, in elastic collisions, this is specifically elastic collisions. We will deal with two equations, which is the conservation of energy. Recall natin, conservation of energy states that the energy before, this is the kinetic energy of 1 and kinetic energy of 2. But di nagsunod. Kinetic energy of 1 and kinetic energy of 2 before is equal to the kinetic energy of 1 after and kinetic energy of 2 after. So this is conserved. Sa momentum naman, the total momentum before a collision is equal to the total momentum after a collision. Ayan. So, gamit tong dalawang equations na to for this is specifically elastic impacts, makukuha natin itong system of it. Makukuha natin itong equation, which is v sub 1 minus v sub 2 equals u sub 2 minus u sub 1, which is also equals negative u sub 1 minus u sub 2. When we divide both sides by negative u sub 1 minus u sub 2, we will get some interesting results. So this is minus. So when we divide it, magka-cancel todo, so that is equal to 1, which is recalled since elastic collision to, energy is conserved. This is what we see earlier as the E value. So what do we mean by E value? This is the coefficient of restitution. The coefficient before the fact. This is U sub 1 minus U sub 2. Ito yung gagamitin natin for instances na E is greater than 0 and less than or equal to 1. So, hindi natin nagagamitin yun for E equals 0 kasi pwede mo namang i-factor out yung key doon. But later on, pag-aaralan natin yan in our problems. So, the coefficient of restitution is like the ratio, or rather the measure of how much kinetic energy is conserved. Pag 1 ang E mo, ibig sabihin na conserved talaga ang kinetic energy. Pag 0, hindi naman nawala lahat, pero nag-stick sila together. So, nag-negate yung kinetic energy ng isa. Okay. Now, let's deal with the problem-solving strategy involving these collision problems. So, ang first step daw is to read the problem, which kailangan naman natin talagang gawin, and then draw and label a rough sketch. So, suppose meron ka daw dalawang objects na sa slide. Yan, rough sketch na yan. Indicate the direction of motion. So, to the right daw yung isa, tapos ito to the left by drawing vectors. Choose the x-axis along the line of collision. So, this is our x-axis. And indicate the positive direction. So, may positive direction dito. Ito yung negative direction, syempre. So, velocities must be reckoned as positive or negative based on this choice. So, ang velocity, object daw na nag-move to the right has a positive velocity, which is this. Pag nag-move naman sa left, this has a negative velocity based sa sign convention. Number 3, make a list of the given masses and velocities. So, very important talaga mag-rate ka ng given like m sub 1, m sub 2, initial velocity u sub 1, u sub 2, tapos v sub 1 and v sub 2. Kung ano naman yung given, syempre. Take care to use the appropriate sign and units for each velocity. So, again, base sa sign convention na ginamit mo, yun yung magiging sign ng velocities na givens. The use of appropriate subscript and letters will help you keep track of the different masses and velocities before and after the collision. So when we say m sub 1, u sub 1, v sub 1, this describe the first object, while m sub 2, u sub 2, and v sub 2 describe the second object. Now next, dito na tayo sa mismong solving. Write the conservation of momentum equation. So remember, for any value of E within 0 to 1, ginagamit pa rin natin itong equation. Since momentum is always conserved in collision problems. Substitute all given quantities and simplify the resulting expression. When you substitute velocities, it is essential to include the appropriate signs for each velocities. So, bale, ang plan natin na makuhang equation is parang ganito. M sub 1, v sub 1, plus m sub 2, v sub 2, equals the sum of velocities as the sum of the momentums before. Yan. So, bali, most of the time, hinahanap natin ang v sub 1 and v sub 2. Pero there's some instances na probably hinahanap yung v sub 1 and v sub 2. So, this is. So, mahalaga pa rin malaman natin yung conservation of momentum equation. If the collision is completely inelastic, that is when E is equal to 0, you proceed by solving the momentum equation for the unknown quantity. So, what does that mean? Since nga, di ba, na-derive natin kanina, that's E equals negative V sub 1 minus V sub 2 over U sub 1 minus U sub 2. When E is equal to 0, then your final velocity is, yeah, this one, V sub 1 minus V sub 2 is equal to 0. Therefore, we can see that the V sub 1 is equal to V sub 2. Since the same velocity, we can just make it into V. And this simplifies our equation as m sub 1, quantity m sub 1 plus m sub 2 times V equals the total momentum before. So, ganyan na magsisimplify and mahanap mo na agad yung V just by dividing the mass, the total mass of the system. However, pag hindi naman E equals 0, we will use this equation. So, that's V sub 2 minus V sub 1 equals E times U sub 1 minus U sub 2. So, kung ano man ito times the coefficient of restitution, that will be your constant for this equation. If perfectly elastic yung collision mo, then E is equal to 1. It's just technically kung perfectly elastic, V sub 2 minus V sub 1. I mean, V sub 2 minus V sub 1 equals E sub 1 minus E sub 1, U sub 1 minus U sub 2. Ayan. So, V sub 2 minus V sub 1 equals U sub 1 minus U sub 2. So, ganyan lang yung magiging second equation natin. This is solvable na in your initial part. Okay. So, let's proceed with the problems na to see this in action. Okay. For if problem, a 2 kilogram ball is traveling to the left with a speed of 24 meters per second, collides head-on with a 4 kilogram ball traveling to the right at 16 meters per second. A, find the resulting velocity if the two balls stick together on impact, and B, find their final velocities if the coefficient of restitution is 0.80. So, ang first step daw is gumawa ka ng rough sketch. Ayan na. So, meron daw tayong two balls. Yung isa, yung 2 kilogram ball traveling to the left. So, let's indicate this as V sub 1. I mean, U sub 1 since initial siya. Ito naman yung 4 kilogram ball traveling to the right. Let's indicate this as U sub 2. Ngayon, lalagyan na natin ang sign convention. So, we'll say that this side is the positive side, while this side is the negative side. Therefore, once na nag-list na tayo ng givens natin, so that is, for letter A ito M sub 1 equals 2 kilograms. M sub 2 equals 4 kilograms. And U sub 1 equals, ano yung speed? It's traveling to the negative speed of 24 meters per second. U sub 2 is traveling to the right at 16 meters per second. Here we're finding the resulting velocity of the two balls stick together. So eventually, mag-stick siya together, and therefore, it has a unified velocity, V. So, again, gagamitan natin ng conservation momentum equation, that is M sub 1, U sub 1 plus M sub 2, U sub 2 equals, since nag-stick siya together, we'll just say that this is 1 unit, M sub 1 plus M sub 2 times the velocity V. To get v, we will divide both sides by m sub 1 plus m sub 2. We'll get m sub 1, u sub 1, plus m sub 2, u sub 2, divided by m sub 1 plus m sub 2. Substituting the values, we have m sub 1 equals 2 kilograms, u sub 1 negative 24 meters per second, plus m sub 2, which is 4 kilograms, times yung u sub 2, which is positive 16 meters per second. That's divided by, ano yung m sub 1 natin? That's 2 kilograms. Plus yung m sub 2, that is 4 kilograms. So, input mo lang sa calculator yan, you will get, check ko kung tama ang aking sagot. So, that's 2 times negative 24 plus 4 times 16 divided by 2 plus 6, 2 plus 4 rather. That's 2.67. Positive, 2.67 meters per second. So that's for letter A. Okay, observe po na natin kung paano nakuha. So yung total momentum before the collision is equal to the total momentum after the collision. In this case, however, since they stick together, they have unified velocity. And therefore, pwede mo lang i-express to as one unit or one sum or one mass. Okay. Then we divide that by the sum of the masses to get this V, which is equal to 2.67 meters per second. Okay, let's proceed to letter B. So we're finding their final velocities if their coefficient of institution is 0.8. Lagyan ulit natin yung mga ano. That's m sub 1 equals 2 kilograms. M sub 2, that is 4 kilograms. U sub 1 being negative 24. And U sub 2 being positive 16. For this, sa part naman na ito, we'll utilize the second equation. So again, expression na natin yung first equation natin. That's m sub 1, u sub 1, plus m sub 2, u sub 2. Since di na sila nag-collide, we will separate them to individual velocities. M sub 1, v sub 1, plus m sub 2, v sub 2. Substitute the values, that is 2 kilograms, velocity of negative 24 meters per second, plus 4 kilograms times positive 16 meters per second. That's equal to m sub 1 natin, that's 2 kilograms. Di binigay yung v sub 1, hinahanap yan. Plus 4 kilograms. Hindi rin binigay yung v sub 2 because hinahanap yan. So simplifying this, that's gonna be 2v sub 1 plus 4v sub 2 equals, ano yun nasa left hand side, with 16 meters per second. Which we can simplify further as v sub 1 plus 2v sub 2 equals 8 meters per second. This is our equation 1. Yung equation 2 natin, magagamit natin dun sa dun sa equation ng coefficient of restitution. Remember, v sub 2 minus v sub 1 equals the coefficient of restitution u sub 1 minus u sub 2. Kung baliktad man kanina, Na-negate ko lang. But it is the same formula. Malaman niyo din bakit ginawa ko ganito. Pero sige. So, V sub 2 minus V sub 1 equals, ano yung coefficient of restitution natin? That's 0.8 times ano yung U sub 1 natin? That is negative 24 meters per second minus ang U sub 2, which is 16 meters per second. So your V sub 2 minus V sub 1 is equal to ano? Negative 32 meters per second. So this is our equation 2. Ngayon, i-add natin itong dalawang equation. This is equation 1 and this is equation 2. So by system, gamitin na natin V sub 2 minus V sub 1 equals negative 32 meters per second. Tama ba ito? Yes. So, pwede natin siya magka-cancel ang V sub 1 since na-negate siya. Ngayon you have this 3 V sub 2 equals 8 minus 32. What is that? That is negative 24 meters per second, and therefore your V sub 2 is negative 8 meters per second. Dali lang yan, diba? Ayan. And itong V sub 2, we substitute it here. So that's gonna be negative 8 meters per second minus V sub 1 equals negative 32 meters per second. Some manipulation lang, that's gonna be V sub 1 equals 32 meters per second minus 8 meters per second. So that's gonna be V sub 1 is equal to 24 meters per second. So that's our answer for the final velocity of object number 1. So ayan ang ating sagot. So again, dito sa part na to, kinuha muna natin conservation of momentum. Then this is the coefficient of restitution equation. Tapos may nakuha tayong system. This is equation 1 and this is equation 2. Then you're gonna solve for V sub 1 and V sub 2 respectively. Well, not respectively, basta i-solve mo lang yung dalawang variables nila. Okay. Let's proceed to the next question. Okay, for our problem number 9, block 1 of mass m sub 1 slides along a frictionless bar and into a one-dimensional elastic collision with stationary block 2 of mass m sub 2 equals 3 m sub 1. Prior to the collision, the center of mass of the two-block system has a speed of 3 meters per second. Afterward, what is the speed of block 2? So we're just gonna do some rough sketch dito sa slide. So block 1 daw, nandito. Then may stationary kang block 2. And this is 3 m sub 1. This is m sub 1. And this block 1 is moving. It is moving. So we're natin u sub 1. Pero, ang in-indicate dito, the center of mass has a speed of 3 meters per second. Gagamitin natin ng sign convention. So yung center of mass daw, so hindi natin alam kung ano yun. It is moving at a speed of 3 meters per second. We're finding the speed of the block 2 after the collision. Okay. So, lagay natin ang given dito, that is m sub 1 being m sub 1. Then m sub 1 equals m sub 1. And m sub 2 equals thrice of m sub 1. The center of mass, which is m sub c, is the total mass of this. This is just gonna be m sub 1 plus m sub 2, which is m sub 1 plus 3m sub 1. That's 4m sub 1. Meron kang initial velocity, which is we don't know. Itong initial velocity ng m sub 2 is 0. And yung initial velocity ng center of mass mo is 3 meters per second. And we are finding the speed of block 2, which is v sub 2. Mahanap mo rin ang v sub 1, but that's not important in this problem. So let's deal with this na. So ang ang una natin gagawin, sinabi dito it is elastic collision. Okay. We'll also indicate the elastic collision, which is E equals 1. Okay. So unang gagawin muna natin is yung yung conservation of momentum. So kung nare-recall din sa lecture to, sinabi ko na ang total momentum ng isang object ay ng isang system is equal to the mass, or the total mass of the system, which is the mass of the center of mass, times the velocity of the center of mass. So, ganyan yung equation, diba? So, magka-cancel tayo ng u sub 2 since yun yung ano natin. Yan yung na-cancel. Ayan, 0. So, and hanapin natin u sub 1. So, we're gonna divide both sides by m sub 1 to get u sub 1. So, that's u sub 1 equals m sub c, u sub c over m sub 1. Ang m sub c natin, that's 4 n sub 1. Ang u sub c natin, that is 3 meters per second divided by m sub 1. Kasi ng m sub 1, that's gonna be 12 meters per second moving to the right. Dun sa sketch natin kanina, ayan, moving to the right. Yan yung m sub, yun yung u sub 1. And hanapin na natin yung mismo v sub 2. So again, conservation of momentum, m sub 1, u sub 1, plus m sub 2, u sub 2. Ano to? Equals m sub 1, v sub 1, plus m sub 2, v sub 2. So this is gonna be substitute natin values is m sub 1 times 12. This is cancelled automatically, don't worry. Meters per second equals m sub 1, v sub 1, plus 3m sub 1 times v sub 2. Kakancel ang mga m sub 1. So v sub 1 plus 3v sub 2 is equal to 12 meters per second. This is our equation 1. For equation 2, gagamitin natin yung formula na v sub 2 minus v sub 1 equals the coefficient of restitution times u sub 1 minus u sub 2. Okay. So that's gonna be v sub 2 minus v sub 1 equals, ano yung coefficient of restitution? That's 1. Ano yung u sub 1 natin? That is 12 meters per second minus 0 meters per second. So this is gonna be v sub 2 minus v sub 1 is equal to 12 meters per second. So that's our equation number 2. Ngayon, i-add natin itong dalawang equations. It's gonna be v sub 2 minus v sub 1 equals 12. And v sub 1 plus 3v sub 2 is equal to 12. You'll get a cancelled v sub 1. And pag in-add mo to, that's gonna be 4 times v sub 2 equals 24 meters per second. Divide both sides by 4, you get a v sub 2 value of 6 meters per second. So that's our answer for problem number 9. So basic lang, diba? So i-process ulit natin, hinanap muna natin ang u sub 1 using the center of mass. Then, ginamit na natin yung collision problem strategy, which is for elastic collisions, gamitin natin ang conservation of momentum before and after, then yung coefficient of restitution. Okay, for our last problem, 2 kilogram bodies A and B collide. The velocities before the collision are VA. V sub A equals 15I plus 30J meters per second, and V sub B is equal to negative 10I plus 5J meters per second. After the collision, V sub A was negative 5I plus 20J meters per second. What are A, the final velocity of B, and B, the change in the total kinetic energy, including the sign? So let's deal with letter A first. So may givens naman na tayo dito. Don't worry. Hindi ko na isusulat. Ang hinahanap natin for letter A is the final velocity of B. So we're finding V sub B prime. So to find that, gagamitin natin yung conservation of momentum ulit. So that's gonna be m sub 1 v sub a, m sub a v sub a plus m sub b v sub b is equal to m sub a v sub a prime plus m sub b v sub b prime. So in indicate dito, it's 2 kilogram bodies. So they're the same masses, therefore we can cancel those. Will yield this equation v sub a plus v sub b equals v sub a prime plus v sub b prime. We're finding v sub b prime, we're just gonna do some manipulation. So that's v sub b prime is equal to the sum v sub a plus v sub b minus v sub a prime. So to find that, we're just gonna do some basic addition. V sub b prime is equal to ano yung v sub a natin, that is 15I plus 30J plus ano yung v sub b, that is negative 10I plus 5J, tapos minus ano yung v sub a prime, that is negative 5I plus 20J. So combine lang natin ng like terms, that is gonna be 15 minus 10 minus negative 5I plus 30 plus 5 minus 20J, which is, pag sinag mo yan, that's gonna be v sub b prime is equal to 15 minus 10 plus 5, that is 10I. Tama ba? 15 minus 10 plus, that's 10I plus 30 plus 5, that's 35 minus 20, that's 15J meters per second. So That's our answer for letter A. Okay. Now next, we're going to letter B, which is the change in the total kinetic energies between the sign. So remember the change in kinetic energy that is equal to the final kinetic energy minus the initial kinetic energy. So it's just gonna be 1/2 m sub a, the v sub a. This is a scalar quantity, therefore kailangan natin gawing scalar. V sub a prime quantity squared plus 1/2 m sub b times the scalar of v sub b prime quantity squared minus the quantity 1/2 m sub a v sub a plus this is squared to 1/2 m sub b, the scalar of v sub b quantity squared. Okay, how do you find the scalar of those vectors? So remember that pag hinanap natin yung magnitude is just the square root of the sum of the squares of the components. So for v sub a, gagawin na natin v sub a squared para hindi na natin i-deal with the square root. That's just gonna be 15i since 15 quantity squared plus 30 squared, that is 15 squared plus 30 squared, that is 1125. Ang unit is square meters per square seconds. For v sub b prime, for v sub b quantity squared, that is negative 10i, diba? So negative 10 squared plus 5. That is 125 square meters per square seconds. For v sub a prime, quantity squared, that is, ano yung v sub a natin, that's negative 5 squared plus 20 squared, that is 425 square meters per square seconds. And for v sub b prime, quantity squared, that is, ang sagot natin kanina is 10i plus 15j. Therefore, that's 10 squared plus 15 squared is 325 square meters per square seconds. Okay, those units gagamitin na natin. And remember that m sub a, batay sa given, that is 2 kilograms. And m sub b is 2 kilograms. And to get those, we're just gonna factor out yung 1/2, which is dominant naman sa lahat. So m sub a, that is 2 kilograms. Then v prime sub a, that is 425 square meters per square seconds plus m sub b, that's 2 kilograms times, and v sub b, that's 325 square meters per square seconds minus m sub a, that's 2 kilograms, that's yung v sub a squared, that is 1125 square meters per square seconds minus, so that since dinistribute lang yan 2 kilograms times 125 square meters per square seconds. So evaluate, so yung change ng kinetic energy natin, it's gonna be 1/2 times 2 times 425 plus 2 times 325 minus 2 times 1125 minus 2 times 125, which is negative 500. Ang unit niya is in joules. So that's our answer for letter B. Okay. Again, for letter A, ang ginawa natin is yung conservation of momentum. Since the same lang yung units the same lang quantities ng masses, we cancel those and we solve for V sub B prime. May nakuha tayong 10I plus 15J meters per second. Dito naman sa letter B, hinanap natin kinetic energy, kailangan natin muna hanapin yung mga scalar quantities ng velocities. Then ginamit natin ang kinetic energy formula, which is the 1/2 mv squared. Tapos yung mga, ayan, yung final minus yung initial. Yan yung change in kinetic energy. And we got a negative 500 joules, which indicates that nag-lose yung system now. 500 joules. So that's it for our discussion.